were defeated in Wad Isli in Wajda, in the east of Morocco in 1844. And that Morocco started to believe that they have to respond, to endorse, and to demystify European modernity. So while some of them, so there was a split between the two, there's a binary opposition for those who are welcoming this hadatha, this modernity. They face it with fascinations, especially for the Western military power. And I think Moroccan sultans, such as Hassan I, decided to introduce military reforms, taxation reforms, economic and educational, in order to get out of this backwardness. So the Moroccan intellectual elites also were bisected into a duality of opposition and attraction. In other words, while some of the elite or scholars, be they Salafis, fuqaha, Sufi order, ulama, scholars, religious scholars, some of them express a kind of fascination, bewilderment, astonishment, wonder, while others considered at that time, and always we have those who are conservative and those who are liberal and trying to endorse the others' modernity with kind of care, and because for them, they considered to be a manufacture of jinn and magic. So there was an array of fatwas from Sharia perspective regarding Western innovations. At this era, I'm saying from 1844 up to 1956, the pre-colonial period and colonial period, the modern Moroccan society was really traditional. So any innovation from the West was conceived and inspected by ulama and religious scholars. These scholars were considered as kind of guardians of the religious authenticity. So they also protected legal norms and Islamic ethical values. They ensured the role of gatekeeper that enshrined rigorous ideological shields. In this respect, they issued fatwas on telegraph, telephone, gunpowder, modern outfit, taxations, trade with Westerners, candles, music, printing press, soap. Soap, for some, they said that because it is made of pork fat, pig fat, so it's not accepted to do the ablution before the prayers. So you see this banknotes, military salutations. So many issues were kind of rejected. However, they were endorsed later on. Although the Moroccan elite displayed a kind of great enthusiasm or zeal towards modernizing the army, the theologists, mainly fuqaha, also dealt with the issue from a Sharia's perspective. For instance, I give you example like of Muhammad Abul Qadir Kardudi, who argued that the use of guns against the enemy is legal in Sharia. On the other hand, there was another faqih, Abi Isa ibn Musa, who used a fatwa to justify the use of gunpowder. According to him, gunpowder was not used during the era of Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad. Although it was an innovation, and there is innovation is heresy, and any heresy leads to hell. So he said that although it was an innovation, it was highly welcomed and appreciated because it relied on a verse from the Quran, prepare to fight them with as many weapons as you can. So the telegraph, again, as an innovation, was questioned in terms of Sharia dictates, especially when it has to transmit some messages to inform people of some religious festive or rituals, such as the beginning and the end of Ramadan. There is another innovation, the use of phonograph. At the outset, it was forbidden by Sheikh Ahmed al-Khayyat. Several ulamas, again, considered playing Quran out loud in the street through phonographs is considered as a sacrilege to the sanctity of the Quran, which is Kalamullah, which is the words of Allah. Another scholar at this period, and he was a judge in Maknas, Ahmad bin Abdul Malik al-Alawi, didn't accept any testimony from someone who drinks alcohol. Also, Muhammad bin Ibrahim Sbahi banned the use of printing press, alcohol, tobacco. Tobacco didn't come with the colonial powers, but it came, I think, from Africa a long time ago. I mean, during the Muwahhids dynasty, where they brought some elephants and they brought tobacco to Morocco. So Morocco, tobacco didn't come just from the West. Also, trading with the Europeans, wearing clothes tailored by the atheist. So among the elite, there was also, these are individual fuqaha, but there is another movement, a Salafi movement at that period. This Salafi movement called for the return to the pure sources of Islam, such as the Quran, the Sunnah, and the implementations of actions of Sahaba, the companions, and the followers. The mission of the Moroccan Salafism was to reconcile the tradition and the modernity. And here this idea reiterates something that Al-Farabi did when he reconciled religion and philosophy in his book, Kitabul Millah, the book of religions. Also, there is another idea I have already tackled in one of my writings about the constant and the changing in the Moroccan identity. So this notion of the tradition and modernity has been exhausted in Moroccan academia. And among them, there is Muhammad Aziz al-Hababi, who talked about the Muslim personalism, how the person in Islam, an individual can be a person or personality only through achieving dignity. And it's another issue if we have another time to talk about. It's really an interesting book that I have translated from Arabic into English. Now, the Salafi movements tend to fight against foreign colonialism. And I think in moments when people feel that they have a threat or a menace from outside, they resort to religion. And here, I remember Karl Marx and Baumière, the 18th Baumière, when during the French Revolution, people used slogans that dated back to the Roman Empire. This is a call for the past to fight a kind of undesirable powers in the present. There were two generations of Moroccan Salafi reformers at that period of Yusuf, Rabbi Yusuf Masas or Mashash. There were the pioneers who were Abu Bushaib Dukali. Dukali comes from the region of Dukala in Jadida. And there's also Abdeslam bin Nuna. The second wave, which is the period of from the 1912 to 1964, there is Ala al-Fasi. And Ala al-Fasi here, these Ala al-Fasi, Hassan ibn Wazan, Mukhtar Susi, Omar bin Abd Jalil is from Maknas, Abdullah Gannoun, Miki Nasiri, Muhammad Aziz al-Hababi, I just mentioned, they all belong to the urban areas of Rabat, Fes, Maknas, and Salih. So the Salafi reformists thought aimed at three main goals. The first one is fighting colonialism. The second one is spreading enlightenment of minds, not to be corrupted with the Western secularism. Also to nudge awareness in the society among Moroccans. Now, according to Dr. Muhammad Al-Kitani, he's from a Sufi order called Zawiya Kitaniya, Salafism was resurrected in the modern era to combat, to fight the delusions and the European hegemony or dominance. Also to rescue Muslims from heresies and superstitions. In this respect, I think Ibn al-Maqarri al-Marrakshi was between the period of 1880 to 1946. He was a great Sufi thinker. He complained sorely of the vicious practices, which is al-munkar at that period. And it was frequent establishment of, especially with the coming of the French and the Spanish protectorate. I'm gonna deal with this when I'm gonna talk about education, how education was used as a state ideology, state apparatus to split Moroccans, be they Jew or Muslim, be they, when I talk about Muslim, be they Arab or Amazigh. So the establishment of the cabinet, so there was a legal corruption, changes in the outfit. There was a youth acculturation. And the problem with the French colonialism in Morocco, they use acculturation rather than assimilation, unlike in Algeria. In Morocco, they tried to target the educational system and also to split between the Amazigh and the Arab with the Dahir Barbary in 1930. And I think also the French, I'm gonna talk about this in depth later on if I still have some time. Please, would you mind reminding me of the time?
Yeah, around, let's go for another 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Al-Qahtani criticized also many aspects of modern life he observed around him, such as record player, unveiling the brides, recording women's voices, European outfit, reading newspaper and magazines. And I think unveiling the bride was also mentioned by Rabbi Yusuf Masas. And some of the elements here, for example, like the record player, and was used by political Islam later on in order to disseminate their ideology as well in cassettes. And also reading magazine was forbidden, but again, the nationalists use it against the colonizer in order to disseminate their teachings. Among the eminent reformists at that period of Yusuf Masas, there was al-Fasi. He attempted to do a kind of combination between the return to the Islamic identity and modernity with a kind of constant adjustments according to the laws of Islam. And here, again, he echoes Yusuf Masas, Rabbi Yusuf Masas. He also issued orders to boycott tobacco and alcohol. He encouraged wearing traditional clothes. And I think one of the pictures of Rabbi Yusuf Masas was the robes and the fez hat. And Moroccan, he encouraged clothes that were tailored by Moroccans. And by the way, the Moroccan Jew handcraftsman helped a lot to tailor this kind of traditional clothes. So al-Fasi claimed national unity and Islamic identity. Overall, the reformists didn't allow themselves to entirely be captivated by this modernity. Some of them refused to sacrifice this ancestral thought in favor of thoughts imported and imposed by the French administration. In this respect, there is Hassan bin Wazan, one of the Salafists, also called to abandon, to quit, to boycott modernity brought by the West. Salafism's main worries were two: to combat ignorance and superstition associated with the Sufi order, especially the Zawaya. And here in Maknas, there was Zawiya al-Isawiya that deemed to innovate bid'ah by scholars, such as Al-Faqih bin Shukron, Bu'ashrin, Faqih al-Ghazi. So those were colleagues of Yusuf Masas at that period. And to avoid what we call acculturation done, and also to resist the colonizer that tried to impact, as I mentioned before, the Moroccan youth. Okay, al-Fasi considered as one of the most prominent defenders of the religious constant pillars, which is faith, Sharia, and morals. In the south of Morocco, in the region of Sousse, Beni Rahil, and where I think some of you know the region, there is Mukhtar Susi, who adopted the golden mean that maintain a balance between the spiritual and the intellectual. In other words, he preached what we call preserving the traditions of Moroccan identity, and also openness to Western modernity based on reforms. Now, one of the main goals of reformists is to reconsider the situation of Moroccan women and their realities. Now, I'm going to talk now to the 5 minutes. I'm going to talk about the education. And I think the protectorate powers, once they conquered Morocco and signed the treaty in 1912, they reacted hastily to consolidate their territorial hegemonies. So both Spain and France used schooling as a vehicle of colonization during the protectorate in Morocco. So the colonial powers considered education as one of the pillars of colonial policy. They used different vistas to establish, to sustain the hegemonies. And here there was schools like the Franco-Berber or Amazigh, I would say, schools, the Spanish Arab schools and Spanish Jewish schools. Now, the Moroccans established at this time counter a kind of resistance movement to react to the newly imposed colonial hegemonies, such as free schools, al-Madaris al-Hurra. And they reformed also the traditional Quranic schools themselves. European education was characterized by ethnic segregation. I mean, they are European, Israeli Moroccans, Muslim Moroccans, and again, between Arabs and the Amazigh. And there was also a social distinction or social segregation between the sons of notables and the lay people. Now, the colonial power used what we call divide in impera, divide to rule. So they used the ideology state apparatus education. So the Spanish schools in the north of Morocco, you have a Spanish school. There is the Spanish Arab schools, the Quranic schools, Bisid, and the Spanish Hebrew schools. And here there is the Universal Israelite, l'Alliance Israélite Internationale. And you see the French didn't want only to bisect Moroccans, Arabs, and Muslims between Arabs and Amazigh, but also divide the Jew in Morocco, especially for those who used to live in Mellah, in Medina. And when the construction of Hamriya, the Medina, I mean, there are some who moved, but others remained in Mellah. So, and some adopted French, which is a new language. The Moroccan Jew used to speak Amazigh, used to speak Arabic, used to speak Spanish, because they came from Castile. They used to speak Hebrew. But the French was a kind of new tool, ideological tool in order to concoct or to contain the. So the colonial powers took two strategies. In the north, the Spanish give more importance to the Arab identity. In the south, on the French protectorate, they favored the Amazigh to counter the Arab. And I think the free schools.
Professor Dris, I'm terribly sorry. 2 more minutes, if we can.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So the free schools are a kind of reaction that were constructed in order to save Arabic language and Moroccan identity. There were 2 waves. The first one was in 1919. They also reacted to reform the Quranic schools, teaching themselves. They were the outcome of a reaction battlefield to sustain Moroccan identity, language, and religion. They were built by Salafists, by traders, by Sufi order members. As a conclusion now, to conclude, while Spain favored, as I mentioned before, Arabic language and culture to counter the Amazigh in the Rif, the French opted for Amazigh to spread hegemony against the pan-Arab nationalism. Now, at this era, the Moroccan elites, the era of Rabbi Yusuf Masas, they were torn between the spell of tradition and the rejection of the foreign modus vivendi, way of life. All in all, most scholars, educated elites, pioneers of national movement, were keen to criticize opposed colonialism in all its forms and ideologies. Thank you so much for your attention.